Hello and welcome to Just Onside. Hope you're all well. It's Friday. Ois, I presume it's been a long week for you, my friend. So how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It has been a long week, but yeah, Friday night here late in Dubai, and yeah, it's been another good week, challenging week, but yeah, thankful that it's the weekend, bit of rest and recuperation. Never did anyone any harm, so yeah, looking forward to it. How's your week been? Good.
It's been all right. It's been challenging, but it's been all right. I made it to the end of the week, so looking forward to the weekend, but a little bit tense already because Leeds are playing Bristol City tonight. And it's a massive game, huge game, lots of significance because if we do win, we go second, albeit temporarily, but we will be second. So that's a huge psychological boost for Leeds United. So a little bit nervous. As soon as we finish this podcast, I'll be concentrating on that game.
Mhm.
But you've just told me before we started shooting, you told me that there's only a limited amount of juice on your headset. So we we don't want to waste too much time. So we'll get cracking with this show. But before we do that, let me ask the audience, our wonderful audience, to smash a like, share, do all the good stuff. A little shout out to a good friend of mine and good friend of yours, I think, as well, Hussein Randera, who's one of our biggest supporters. So he normally listens to this when he's pumping iron. He's always knows he's a big strapping lad. He looks after himself.
He's
Uh,
he's a big unit, I will say
he's
that.
a he's a powerful unit. He'll be blasting his guns or whatever they call it. I've never been. I don't go to gym, so I've no idea what the terminology is. So he's blasting his abs. He's doing his pecs or whatever it is. So nice one, Hussein. Really appreciate your support as always. Okay, so it's it's been a busy week in the Premier League. We've had a few games. We are going to focus on the game of the weekend. In fact, I think it's the game of the season, really. There's so much riding on it. Liverpool and Arsenal. That's the main event. But before we talk about the main event, I want to talk about Marcus Rashford, who's been a bit of a naughty boy, but he sort of redeemed himself by scoring a fantastic goal, I think. But I want to just delve into sort of Marcus Rashford and what's sort of been happening, not just recently, but maybe over the last 18 months or so. He burst onto the scene. He was absolutely fantastic. He was making all the right noises. But over the last year and a half, I don't know, has he been sidetracked? Has the trappings of wealth seducing this fella? What's your thoughts?
It was interesting, Ayub. I watched the overlap. I don't know if you watched it as well, but they opened up with the subject actually. Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher, Ian Wright, and Roy Keane, and they discussed it at length. I was quite surprised a little bit at the context of the conversation, but also the responses. I mean, Carragher was fairly pragmatic as always, but Roy Keane was quite keen to stress that ultimately he's a boy who's 26 and he's going to make some mistakes, and you've got to allow him to make some mistakes, which is a little bit surprising given that it's Roy Keane, where he's taken a very different tone at other times, talking about professionals, is one of his favorite words that he uses. So that was a very interesting debate. I would encourage anyone to watch that discussion that the four of them had. I mean, in my view, is a fairly simple and straightforward one. It's I'm surprised at the fact that there's a number of people, number of commentators, number of sporting within the footballing fraternity that are still fairly sympathetic towards Marcus Rashford. I mean, he's had, to your point, Ayub, as you introduced the topic, a couple of indiscretions, hasn't he? And not least, and some that he's got away with. If you remember, famously last year, I think away to Wolves when he was their main man. Let's be honest, and I think arrived late for training. Fine. I mean, everyone sleeps in every now and again, and he came off the bench with the right reaction and scored the goal and should have had another. I think, look, ultimately what's happened this time, I mean, for those unaware, he ended up in Belfast, I believe it was, Ayub, had a few drinks and was a little worse aware and pushed back his flight and I think missed training the next day. I mean, look, for me, it sounds. I mean, none of us are in the footballing kind of. We're not on the inside of you, but I'm surprised that it's taken like in such an easy way that, yeah, players are late for training. I mean, there are some standards that I think if you're trying to strive for excellence, I think arriving on time, punctuality, respect for your fellow professionals, for the club, for the fans, it's just basic, decent standards, isn't it? Arriving on time and what have you. Yeah, it seems to be fairly commonplace, apparently, at clubs. I mean, yeah, again, going back to it, my view is pretty standard. I think patience is wearing thin. I'm surprised at the sympathy he gets. He's an incredible footballer, but we can discuss both elements very separately, right? They're exclusive of one another. Is he a fantastic footballer? I believe he is. Is he a footballer that suddenly seems to be, I don't want to say, there's certainly something clearly not right at you. Now, the problem is it kind of, for me, leans into that typical narrative about footballers, unfortunately. He's got paid a handsome salary, a big deal over the summer, what have you. And now all of a sudden you're hearing all about these issues. I think it's quite disrespectful, like I said, to the club, to the players. I don't think you should be in Belfast, honestly, even if you've got training the next morning. I'm not sure why being in Belfast. I mean, you heard the lady calling it, whether it was TalkSport or somewhere else, I'm not sure, talking about how, telling all about how Rashford was saying, oh, come out with us and having a few drinks and all the rest of it. I mean, it's probably the slightly unsavory side of society calling in and telling all and what have you. But I think from my perspective, Ayub, I don't have much sympathy for the footballer. I think his sympathy for him inside the building must be wearing thin. It's a new establishment. It's a new order there at Manchester United Football Club right now with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos. Do I think they can afford? I mean, he's not that good, Ayub, to the point where he's unsellable, right? He's not indispensable to the club. Is he one of their better footballers? Absolutely. Are Manchester United right now where they want to be? No. But there comes, I would say, Ayub, a lot where you have to draw a line in the sand and say, look, if we're going to actually get the team and the club up to the standard and up to the levels that we need them to, sometimes you need to send a message. And I think Marcus Rashford may well be, maybe, possibly in the summer, be made an example of. Do I think it sets them back in the short term? Probably. They've not got an incredible amount of great players. But as you saw with the youngster yesterday and a few other contributions as well, they've got some talent as well. And I think there's something to be said about sometimes not just simply caving to your stars and catering to them. And if you want to kind of achieve long-term success, sometimes you've got to wipe the slate clean. I'm surprised, like I said, at the sympathy that he gets. I'm surprised it's perhaps not as tough as it perhaps could be. I think some of the media have covered it fairly well, I would say. But again, I'll be interested to see what happens, and I would not be surprised genuinely if he's not there post summer.
Right, interesting. I mean, I'm not going to be as. I mean, yeah, I don't think you were gentle on him, but I think he's a disgrace, absolute disgrace. I mean, you talk obviously about the salaries that these players are on, but I think he's just. I mean, I've called it before that he's much more interested in the stuff that sort of surrounds footballers these days. I would have got rid of him a long time ago. I think he's symptomatic of the malaise at the club. There's too many characters like that. I mean, obviously, we always revert back to Ferguson. Would it have happened under Ferguson? If it would have happened, it would have been nipped in the bud. These players, I don't know. I mean, he's 26. He's not 19. He's 26 years of age. So he's of an age where really he knows absolutely what Manchester United Football Club is all about. He's been there a long time. So he knows the history, the tradition, and what's expected. As I said, he did it because he knows he can get away with it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's inexcusable. The club really need to make a stance. And just before you go again, OS, I'm going to use an example. I mean, initially we had Jed Spence on loan, a really good talent, and a proven talent in the Championship. But Daniel Fort just got rid of him. And at the start, we were unsure as to what had happened, but obviously you could sort of probably work out there was some sort of issues with conduct. The reason was Daniel Fort wasn't impressed with his attitude. So he called him in for a meeting. It was not just the attitude, but application, being late. And he called him in for a meeting. and he was late for the meeting that he'd called him in for. Straight away, as soon as he had arrived late, he said, right, you're not going to be part of this football club anymore. I don't care how good you are on your way back to Spurs. Uh, it it sort of impacted the club in a sense because we're desperate for right backs. But I like Falk's attitude. That's the way it should be. At the end of the day, nobody is bigger than the club. I don't care how good you are. And I think that's what I expect from a club of the standing of Manchester United.
Just on the Jed Spence piece, I mean, you're closer to it than I am. I mean, they sent him back before his loan period had ended. I mean, that was that was the telltale sign. I mean, I read the story at the time, and you're right, it was attitude issues. And you have to also consider why Antonio Conte wasn't as keen on him at Spurs, even though the season before you, but as you rightly know, he had a great season, didn't he, in the Championship? So he was a star that people thought he could be an amazing right back, right wing back, whatever it may be. And to your point, he's perhaps not to the level where managers and clubs have to put up with certain tardiness, right? And I think with Rashford, obviously he's reached levels. And one of my favorite sports commentators talks about how production is often linked to tolerance. If your production is high, the tolerance will be high. If your production dips, the tolerance to your let's say, quote unquote nonsense will also be limited. And I think with Rashford, look, he's having a fairly below average season. I think it's fair to say. And I think the issue that the point that you make is a good one. The question is, what are some of the other kind of folks and players in the dressing room thinking when Ten Hag's letting him get away with it with a little slap on the wrist and considering it an internal matter. Now, look, it's obviously they can't sell him now anyway. I know the transfer window just ended. I'm not saying they would want to sell him. I'm just saying his hands are tied somewhat. He has to speak a good game, and he's a player that they need, right? They've got aims and ambitions this season, and Marcus Rashford goes a long way to trying to get them to achieve those. But again, when I look at that, there's some stories leaking out from, I guess, the dressing room, from the club, that he's quite an aloof character. It seems, I don't know whether that's some of the players kind of briefing the media or whatever it may be, but some of the stories coming out of the club also reflect of a character that perhaps needs to have a look at himself, right? And then you're right, Ian Wright made this point to yours. He's 26, and at this stage, you tend to think you know a few things. I know he's supported by his brothers, his mum's a key integral part, and more power to them. But ultimately, he's clearly not making, let's say, the right decisions. He's not being reflected in the right light. And finally, when you think and consider that we're a few months away, probably 2 to 3 months away, probably a few more, to Gareth Southgate naming his squad for the European Championships, this is the kind of stuff that's not going to bode well for him. Given that there's extreme competition on the wings. Yeah, again, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved on from him in the summer, honestly, just because I think there's a decent chance, maybe not, that the manager's there. I'm not so sure. New club, new establishment, new way of working. They may just think, look, you know what? We need to build this club again from scratch, so to speak. So really interested to see what happens. What do you think? He stays on, are you? But do you see any situation where they perhaps get rid of him in the summer?
If Man United want to go forward as a football club, then they have to sell him. Simple as that. Because he's a bad egg at this moment in time. I just don't like his attitude, and I've sort of commented many times. But it sounds quite flippant when I talk about pre-tattoos and then post-tattoos. He just is not. I mean, I saw a still picture with big, massive silver chair. As I said, at the end of the day, I mean, there's other players who dress in a certain way. It doesn't mean that it's going to mean that they're not coming to play football, but he just seems to have been seduced by the lifestyle. It's tattoos, funky hairstyles. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm old school. Maybe I'm just thinking that concentrate on football. If that's going okay, everything takes care of itself. But he just seems to be sort of sidetracked too much. As I said, it's just inexcusable. I could understand maybe a player who's just broken onto the scene, perhaps having a night out, but not a 26-year-old, not an established England international, not a player of the caliber of Marcus Rashford. I mean, he stagnated. I think he was better, a much better player a few years ago because he was focused on football. I think there's too many other distractions. I'd get rid. And I think that would send a statement out, not just to Rashford, but to Manchester United as a football club that, right, we're doing our due diligence now. Any player that plays for this club, there's a certain work ethic, a certain attitude, certain application that's needed. At the moment, it just is. It's a club that is just in limbo at this moment in time. I have no idea which way it's going. Jim Ratcliffe has come. I hope he's got some ideas about where he wants to take this club because I certainly think at the moment it's going nowhere. They keep getting results. Obviously, they got a result against the Wolves, but again, that's symptomatic of the way that they're playing this season.
Yeah, just one final point. It's when you mentioned it, I did have a smile on my face with regards to the tattoos. You have mentioned this previously. It was a famous story about in American football when Cam Newton was selected number one with the first overall pick, right, which is the prestigious pick out of the college ranks. And Carolina Panthers selected him, and the owner says to him, the number one pick, right? And he says to him, "Do you have any tattoos?" To which Cam Newton responded, "No," and he said, "Good, let's keep it that way." So it is something that some sporting institutions still regard as important. I mean, look, you're right. I mean, players are. We're talking, we're jesting to some extent. I mean, ultimately, it's not reflective of whether you're going to be able to play or not, but he gives some sort of indication about the fact that he's a certain type of personality, which is absolutely fine. Just produce on the pitch, or at least be available on the pitch. And right now, obviously, letting his teammates down with regards to being late for training or being absent from training. Again, if you're not condemning it, you're condoning it, aren't you? So
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
look, I think that's where I'm sure Man United are discussing it internally and seeing which way they take it. But it's a big story. It's a big step. It'll be interesting to see how he fares, whether he just knuckles down for the rest of the season, or whether or not there's going to be other stories to come and other, let's say, negative stories to come out. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting to sort of see how it goes going forward with Rashford. But right, enough about Rashford. Let's talk about the game of the weekend. Absolute crackerjack of a game. I can't wait. It is going to be an epic battle. But as an Arsenal fan, how important is it for the Arsenal to win that game? Because there is already a few points gap. So is a draw good enough? What do Arsenal need to do to beat a rampant Liverpool at this moment in time? So go on, as an Arsenal fan, tell me.
Normally, I'm quite honestly pragmatic and quite conservative about these big games. I think when you're going up against the very best, and Liverpool are the best team in the league right now, and deservedly so, I'm often of the feeling that you take a draw and you move on. But to your point, ultimately the games are ticking by, right? And if Arsenal have the aspiration of challenging for the title, which they do, given that they came relatively close last season, having pushed City pretty much all the way, I think it's a game that they have to win. And it's not just because for them, Ayub, if I may elaborate. I think Arsenal, if they lose, I don't think they can challenge for the title. I think that's them done. That's genuinely the case. For it's not just the result, you see, it's what it would mean for both teams. That's why I think both teams arrive into this game in very different and very unique situations. What I mean is, Liverpool look like they are taking, and I mentioned this a few episodes ago, if you remember that it's the confidence that they're taking from winning relatively early on the season when they weren't perhaps playing their best stuff, but they kept winning. And then I think they lent into that. Normally, I'm not a big believer that if you play, not saying badly, but if you play average, it normally tends to balance itself out over the course of a season. But what Liverpool have done very interestingly, at least from what I observe, is that they've then understood that, look, this is where we are. These are some of our shortcomings. They've had a couple of injuries as well. Now getting some of those players back, Robertson, Arnold alike in the last, Robertson with a slightly long-term injury. So it bodes well for them. But I think they've got to the point where they feel like, look, we're just going to outscore you. We're going to score goals. And if you can keep up with us, good luck. And I think they've embraced that. Whereas Arsenal at times have been fairly practical, very pragmatic, very slow, very conservative, very, kind of risk averse football. I think the reason why it's a big game for Arsenal is, again, it's not just the win. they need to find a way from an Arsenal perspective to put a little bit of doubt in Liverpool's minds. Liverpool right now are just feeling great about themselves. They've not lost Arsenal this season. They beat them in the FA Cup, even though that first half Arsenal were fairly good, but Liverpool ultimately got the result. And ultimately, the game's about goals. And I just think Liverpool right now, uh, if their confidence isn't shaken by a result, I think they may well just. I'm not saying kind of ride off into the sunset and win the Premier League title, but it's something about a confident team that you need to find a way to shake that. And ultimately, that's what Arsenal had the opportunity to do. I just think Liverpool are so well oiled right now, feeling so good about their game, feeling so great about their performances, knowing they've got goals in them from everywhere. And I think there's a certain arrogance seeping into their game as well, getting great contributions from some young players as well now coming through the ranks. Again, that's another sign, isn't it? When those players can come into a successful team, it's easier, isn't it? You can contribute in a more confident way. You don't feel under pressure. You're not coming into a team where you're asked to be the main man. You just have to complement what the others are doing. I just think Liverpool are in such a good place right now. Arsenal need to find a way to shake that. So not only would it give them a huge fillip, a huge confidence booster by closing that gap, but also beating their nearest rivals at home, just like they've done against Man City earlier this season. I think Liverpool, having lost one game this season, in the Premier League, a game that we had discussed ad nauseum, the controversial defeat at Spurs. They're just in such a good place. Imagine what a win for Liverpool would do. They think that's Arsenal done. City will see this as a game where hopefully, both teams probably can drop points, maybe. But if Liverpool win this game, I genuinely think that they will believe that this is the year. They're going to do it. They're going to run City all the way. And it's my opinion that if they were to win this game of football at the Emirates, beating an Arsenal team, they would, in my mind, be just favourites for the Premier League title, simply because I just think there's something that would do for their confidence, knowing they've beaten a big team in a Premier League match away from home. I think that could be the death knell for Arsenal's Premier League title aspirations.
Absolutely bang on. I echo those sentiments. I think it's a massive game for both clubs for different reasons. I think for the Arsenal, it's absolutely imperative that the Arsenal win. I don't even think a draw is going to be good enough. I think for Arsenal, it's a must win. For Liverpool, it's a must not lose. But if they win, I will say right now, they win the league. Because certainly Arsenal are out of the equation. It will just be too much of a gap. The only serious contenders will be Manchester City. But at the moment, my goodness me, they are oozing class. I think this is all the stars have aligned. The players coming back as well. The performance against Chelsea. I mean, the first half, they were irresistible. It was just fantastic. And you're absolutely right. It's just not just one player, two player, three players. It's the whole team. Everybody knows exactly what their roles are. The energy is there, the commitment's there, the application's there. The fact that Klopp's obviously announced that he will be leaving. I don't know whether that's given them some extra oomph in them, but they're fantastic. You talked about some of the younger players. Connor Bradley, absolutely sensational. McAllister now, I am seeing the McAllister that Liverpool paid. Whatever they paid for him, he's worth every single penny and then some, because he's been outstanding. Nunes he's an enigma. Liverpool fans absolutely adore him. I just sort of think that he causes mayhem. He is chaotic, but I think the penalty miss on another day, a slightly better Chelsea may have made them pay. And it's things like that. I just think, I don't know, he needs to now just sort of make sure that he's a little bit more clinical. He has to work on that sort of final end product, because I know he's hit the post, but you don't get a goal for hitting the post. You get a goal for hitting in sort of between the posts. So I'm still just waiting for him to absolutely click. But apart from that, it's just unbelievable. I'm looking forward to the game. It's not going to be an easy game for Liverpool, even though they're playing some scintillating stuff. I just hope that, obviously, as a sort of Liverpool supporter, I'm hoping that they do the job. And they really deserve to win the game because the way they're playing at this moment in time, it's an absolute pleasure. I it will be hard. It's not going to be easy. And I'm just hoping that Liverpool don't lose the game, which is the key. I think they've just got to make sure they don't lose the game. If they lose the game, I think it just opens up the door for the Arsenal. It might be a slight dent to their confidence, but going by form, I'd expect Liverpool to win this game.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think, look, ultimately, Liverpool have a lot to gain. And to be honest with you, I don't really think they've got a huge amount to lose. They'd still be in a very good position. Yes, it would give Arsenal a fillip by closing the gap. I don't think the City thing is by any chance fatal. I mean, there is so much made up of Man City. I mean, even Jurgen Klopp was clearly talking them up because I think he has a great deal of respect for Man City, and rightly so. But I just think it's slightly overblown. Each season Ayub is played on its merits. Each season, yes, the champions have the opportunity to feel as if it's theirs to lose, and City definitely wear that honor well, right? There's a certain arrogance and there's a certain consistency over time that they've an equity in the bank that they've built that ultimately that allows them to for us to give them that credit to say, look, they do start as favourites, and even now when they were 4, maybe 5 points, whatever behind, people are still thinking, well, they're still favourites, and that's huge out of huge respect for the club and the manager. I just think if Liverpool win this game, I really do feel as though I think it's going right then to the wire. I agree, City probably will not let up, but I think Liverpool can take a huge amount of confidence. I just think they'll think that's one rival got rid of. That allows us to focus on Man City. Liverpool will feel, like Jurgen Klopp spoke about, that when they get Man City at Anfield, that's a game that they can win. No doubt there'll be pressure on. It'll be a huge, huge game. No doubt you feel as if there'll be massive ramifications in that game for sure. But again, the opportunity knocks for Arsenal, doesn't it? Where right now they're a little bit behind, but you got the draw at Anfield, so you could get them back at your place. And then the hope is that you try and produce another inspirational performance to win the game of football. They were pretty dominant, Ayub, against Forest. I think you'll agree. Yes, it got a bit nervy at the end, but I thought they deserved to win the game of football. Liverpool, on the other hand, absolutely, to your point, scintillating and brushed Chelsea aside, Bournemouth aside. That's 8-1 in the last 2 games, scoring plenty. And that's the great thing about that team right now. They will feel, even if Arsenal start off relatively hot, the crowd is into it and all the rest of it, Liverpool will just feel as though our time will come and we will take advantage because we've got goals in us. I do think, actually, that Liverpool will do the business on Sunday, simply because I just think they're in such a groove. You mentioned it, Ayub. And I think Arsenal are still a little unsure of their game. And what I mean by that is he's still not quite solved that left-sided midfield issue. Yes, Martinelli, Jesus, Saka have all, in recent games, all contributed. So they'll all feel pretty confident, but their game is still not as smooth and perhaps as consistent as it was last season when they had Granit Xhaka in the left side of midfield. And right now, I feel as if they're still scratching, they're still searching, they're still hoping that they'll score the requisite goals to win these games. Whereas I think Liverpool go into games thinking, we're going to score, like it or lump it. So there's a certain difference in arrogance, I think, right now between the two teams. And I think what you'll see on Sunday is that slowly manifest itself. I do predict a Liverpool win. I think Arsenal will compete, but I just think it's a huge game, and I think that game will have huge ramifications. There'll be a lot of talking points from the game as well. But I think Liverpool will go favourites for the Premier League title after this Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly favourites for the game, and based on current form, and it's just absolutely wonderful to see Liverpool. I mean, they've always been there or thereabouts the last few years, but there's always been question marks, maybe with the defense, sometimes the midfield, but now it just seems that everything has fallen into place. The defense now, if you look at it, you've got young Conor Bradley, who rightly is keeping out Trent. And in fact, I think it now allows Trent to perhaps go into midfield, where I think he'll be even better. Konate, my goodness me, what a beast. The man is absolutely awesome. I think there was question marks about VVD. I think there was almost, have we seen the best? And maybe is the trajectory now downwards? I think it's, with Konate playing the way that he is, I think he's almost lifted Virgil van Dijk's game. Gomez has been outstanding. If you ask me who I would want, a fully fit Robertson, a fully fit Gomez, it's Gomez. I think he's made that position his own. I think he's a better defender, and I think he's not too bad going forward as well. So in terms of the defense, that's as good a defense as Liverpool have had for many a year. The middle of the park, I think McAllister now. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on McAllister is, but he's been magnificent. He's been absolutely outstanding and a player that I absolutely adore. I thought at the time when he was bought from Wolves for 40 million, I was thinking, is he really worth 40 million? He's worth more than 40 million, Jota. I think he's such an intelligent player, and I think it's essential because I still think Diaz and Nunes are very instinctive players. I don't think they're the brightest of players, and I don't mean that too critically, but they're very much it's spontaneity. Whereas Jota is just you can see his brain whirring away, always looking for cute positions, little spaces, and everything that he does, there's a thought process behind it. So I think at the moment it just seems a team that is in perfect unity. And that's why I think there is. You talked about arrogance, confidence, and I think they are. I think there is a strut about Liverpool at this moment in time. So they certainly will feel confident. Under normal circumstances, or maybe in previous games, it might have been a little apprehension, but I think now they'll be chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's the amazing thing, right? When you're winning games and you're playing well, that arrogance and confidence seeps into your game, and we saw it with Arsenal last season. I think there were times when they were very arrogant in terms of the way they played. I just think this year they've been a little bit more circumspect in games, and I think that's naturally, Ayub, if you think about it, being very risk averse and cautious has naturally created at times a kind of uncertainty. When the game's still 0-0 and you've not created much, or the other team's nicked a goal and what have you, simply because you've not done enough to get out of the margins of, when you can win a game, lose a game, or draw a game. And Arsenal have at times played within those margins too much, and they've often found themselves on the wrong side of those results. Just to kind of round off a few, think about Luton Town. Could have lost the game, could have drawn the game, 97th minute winner. You think about other games as well, where it's just like, you think against Newcastle, they didn't really do enough to win, didn't really do enough to lose. Yes, controversial goal, but they lost the game. Villa, they're pretty dominant, but again, if you play within the margins of the game, you're often going to find yourself on the wrong side of those results. And they have done against West Ham at home, if you remember. A lot of people thought Arsenal played well. I didn't really, and I thought West Ham deserved to win the game of football. Coming back to Liverpool, you mentioned Jota. I think he's like a diminutive kind of version of Firmino, albeit a lot more clinical, I would say, than Firmino. I mean, Firmino, for all his absolute class that he had, I mean, he didn't need to be clinical because he had Salah and Mane, and that was enough in terms of getting him 40-yard lead goals a season, right, or plus. I think that Jota has the goal scoring in him. He's got an incredible record for Liverpool, but he's incredibly cute and intelligent. Whereas, to your point, Diaz and Nunes are more chaotic, instinctive, run with the ball, athletic footballers, right? They rely on their physical attributes and quite often to great benefit. I think Jota just glues everything together, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Where in terms of that midfield, in terms of that strike, he's so smart, he's so intelligent. You can rely on him for a great touch. You can rely on him to win free kicks, but you can also rely on him to be fairly cool under pressure. Left foot, right foot, he's got no qualms whatsoever finishing. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he's not on, or if he's on the score sheet on Sunday. Huge game for both teams. And again, the great thing about the Premier League, Ayub, is that as much as we have stories and narratives, both the options are there for each club or each team to write its own story. And Arsenal have an opportunity to get themselves right back in it. They probably need to keep the crowd in it as well, I would say, because the Emirates can be a great place, as we saw last year. Can also get a little bit nervy when things are not perhaps going as well. Right now, Liverpool, their fans will be traveling in their thousands as well to the Emirates. I think they'll be very, very confident of achieving a result. And honestly, even if they were to lose, I still wouldn't be so downcast or downbeat on their chances, because ultimately there's still a lot of games to play and they've built themselves a little bit of a buffer. So, yeah, lots to play for, but it is the game of the weekend for sure.
Absolutely. Hopefully that's whetted the appetite of our viewers. But before we go, I'm going to have to ask you, what score do you think it will be at the weekend?
I'm going to go for 2-0 Liverpool.
Oh, okay. I'll go 3-1. I'll go 3-1. For Liverpool, obviously. So put your comments down in terms of what you think the score will be. It's going to be a cracking game. I can't wait. I'm really, really excited. And it will have huge ramifications. Right, that is it. There seems to be a lot of activity behind you. I think people are going that a
It's
night
Friday
out in
night.
Dubai. Yeah,
Friday
a night
night,
out in
you and all
Dubai. So I
that.
think when we finish the podcast, you can sort of join them because there's been lots of tactics, lots of activity, lots of hugs, all that kind of stuff. So as always, an absolute pleasure to speak to you, my friend.
Likewise.
Have a nice weekend. And then hopefully we'll shoot next week. Again, it will be on your schedule. You're a busy man, but certainly we need to catch up on reviewing.
It's more the time
the
difference that's the challenge.
but
We'll
we're
get
going to
there.
have to sort of meet. We're going to have to sort of arrange a review of the game because obviously it's a humdinger of a game. I'm absolutely sure. So until the next time, audience, stay safe. Have a lovely weekend, and we look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Ta-da for now.